All right, welcome everybody to workshop number 3. We're almost through the process on this downtown Taft specific plan. We are, or actually I'll start with the logistics since you guys helped out with that last time. I think most everybody here has been here at the Transit Center, but for exiting purposes, we do have the door you came in. We do have the accordion door open, so if you need to leave that way for any reason. If you need to use a restroom, the 2 restrooms out and to your left are both open, so that's available. And I think that's all we need for now, but feel free to get up and get more water, cookies, whatever. There's no shame in having 2. So we'll go ahead and get started. I will introduce everybody. They're in the lineup there on the top of the screen with Rick, Planning and Design, who's our consultant on the project. Many of you have met them at workshop number 2. We have Brooke Peterson, who's the project manager for the specific plan project. Hannah Wong, she was here last time. She may have been taking photos of everybody as we were really concentrating on the project. Unfortunately, we did lose Mimi, who was the dark-haired lady that was here running one of the groups. And then Diego was here as well. He's with City Thinkers. He's going to be presenting some really cool-looking 3D design stuff of what some housing could look like right across the street, Supply Row and 4th Street. And then we also have Adam, who's with the RIC team as well, joining us this evening. So let's go ahead and get started on the PowerPoint. So this is the general schedule we'll be running on this evening. We'll be doing a quick overview presentation of this PowerPoint and where we've come from the second workshop. We'll get into some of the display boards you see in front of you. There's actually 5 more boards on the back side of these with some other categories. Kathy, feel free to sign in and grab materials and join us. And then after about 20 minutes of going through the quick presentation, we were going to break up into multiple groups. So if we had some Zoom folks, we'd be breaking them out digitally and then the rest of us in here. But we'll take a good hour or so going through 10 different groups. You see that in the worksheets you have in front of you. And then we'll come back out after we're done and get a good summation of what feedback you guys have provided this evening. All right, next slide. All right, I'm going to hand it over to Brooke, who's going to go over the materials for this workshop.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark, and hello to everyone. Thanks for letting us join you virtually. We're excited to show you what we've been working on since the last workshop. Just to orient you to the project, kind of where we've been, where we're at tonight. So we kicked off about this time last year. We took through spring and summer to do just an in-depth look at existing conditions and opportunities, constraints. We had our first workshop just to talk through both those kind of existing conditions and what you saw as opportunities and issues in the downtown area, and also talked about the vision and what we would want to achieve through the downtown specific plan update. Through this late summer and fall, we developed a series of land use alternatives, and we came and talked through those with you. I believe it was early December, late November. And then since then, we've been taking all the feedback that we got on those alternatives, and we've developed a draft preferred plan, and also taken the time to start looking at some of the different elements in addition to the land uses that we want to incorporate into the specific plan. So that's really where we are tonight. We want to show you the draft specific plan and go through a couple other activities. From here, we are then going to prepare not just the land use plan, that's what we're showing you tonight. We'll then prepare the plan as a whole, and also we'll be preparing an update to components of the city's zoning ordinance associated with the development standards and zones of the downtown specific plan. And then we also need to prepare essentially an environmental analysis document associated with CEQA. California Environmental Quality Act requires us to analyze what the impacts of the proposed plan might be. So we'll launch into preparing all of those as we go through the spring. We'll then come back for the last workshop to just talk through the draft specific plan with you in the summer, and we're looking and hoping for plan adoption in either August or possibly September. So just to kind of take a moment to look at what we heard at the workshop in the fall. We really spent some time identifying and drafting the vision statement, really what we wanted the plan to achieve and what we wanted downtown to look like in 20 years. A couple of the important things we heard is really want to promote a jobs housing balance as we look at new land uses, as we look at how to infuse and then bring in new housing, as well as the jobs and retail and entertainment to support that. We heard loud and clear really that Taft has a unique character. It has a unique small town Americana feel that is quite unique and just has been disappearing from other towns, and it's really important to embrace that and emphasize that in everything that we're considering in the recommendations of the plan. And then really the last theme we heard is that you really want to expand the opportunities for how to come together, how to interact together, and just give maximum opportunities for social interaction through the downtown. So the purpose for tonight is just to talk with you, to have opportunity for discussion on different pieces going into the specific plan, present the preferred land use plan, as I mentioned to you tonight, talk through something that we call the pro forma analysis, and I'm going to go through what that means in just a moment, and then gather your input on the different elements of design that would add to that land use plan to kind of round out what we look at in terms of setting a plan forward and setting a framework forward for the downtown area. So as I mentioned, I promised I'd tell you what an economic pro forma is. So an important step to evaluating the best land uses, which is what you'll see in the preferred plan, is looking at the feasibility or ability for development to occur in a way that essentially that makes money. Development has to be able to essentially afford to build. So we did an analysis called a pro forma that looks at the anticipated revenue associated with either a for sale development or a for rent development compared to the costs, such as like the purchase of land or construction, and how those relate to each other, such that does that make money or is it in the negative? Does it cost more than the project would essentially produce in revenue? So the purpose was really to identify the densities of new housing and what zoning standards in terms of kind of how high, how many units, how far back from the street it might need to be, et cetera, that would be necessary to attract and incentivize development to come into the downtown. So we analyzed two different what we call products types. So two different types of residential, multifamily residential. We looked at townhomes on this site. And I'll show you the sites and the designs, and Diego's going to walk through them. But we looked at a 12 units per acre, and we'll kind of show you a picture of what that looks like on one site. And that we also looked at, and those would be for sale. And then we looked at for rent apartment project that could be located at up to 24 dwelling units to an acre. So that's what's meant by under the description, the apartments or the townhome and those associated densities. And really this analysis allows us to look at the level of financial support that would be needed to attract that development. And what we found was, and you can see it here in the red, that essentially because of the cost of land or the associated sale price or rent that could be captured, without some sort of what we call gap financing, which could be either a subsidy or a grant or a benefit provided either by the city or by some other entity, that there was actually a negative result of the development. So essentially, in order to attract the development, there's going to have to be some sort of public subsidy and support and gap financing to attract development into the downtown area. So I'm going to turn it over to Diego and let him kind of talk through what this means on the ground and what it could look like and such.
Great, thank you, Brooke. So I've been asked to then take building type and look at what that would, how would that look on an area. I think I'm freezing there. On an area just close by, just nearby here on 4th Street and Supply Row. And the townhome building type typically lays out with individual garages on the first floor. There might or an entry area. And then on the second floor is your living space, kitchen, living space. And then the third floor would have your bedrooms. And so they tend to be larger units, which is nice for families. They're not really stacked. And so they really live in some ways like single family. A lot of them have private open space. They might have a patio or a porch. They are a good positive frontage on the street with stoops and front porches and balconies. And so as you can see here, we looked at kind of extending along these layout. You can also have nice paseos and paths that connect back to the rail trail and the park there. So the next walk-up apartments, and those tend to be more typical for rent. They tend to be smaller, in the range of 750 to maybe 1,200. Like the townhomes, but sometimes it can be 2 stories. Anything beyond that, you need elevators, and so it gets expensive. And so, they're walk-up apartments. They share the parking in a parking lot. They tend to have more common amenities, such as pools or playgrounds or recreation buildings, gyms. So that's a nice element into the development. And, we can also include things like front porches and stoops and balconies facing Supply Row or 4th. But I think the main thing here is to make sure that as easy to get to by foot as they are by car, and providing lots of really good connections in and around the development. So these are those 2 options, and hopefully you can kind of see where those are right across the. So this would be a view looking up the park there, and these are the townhomes. This is the Rails Trail Park, and we tried to think about changes of materials, change in articulation, and just again, like I said, the frontage on the park, really taking advantage of that beautiful park that you have there. Can you all hear me okay?
You are cutting in and out just a bit.
Okay, if you can go to the next slide, please. So these are some of the key things. One of the things with townhomes is we will want to make sure that we have a community amenity of some sort. Very privatized. So the next, am I here? Hello? This problem before. So this is another view looking further down, close to where you all are, and option of apartments. And in this case, I think one of the things we want to and connections into the apartment complex. If you go to the next slide, please. We can also accomplish a variation, feel bulky and large and dense, so that there's a nice variation, a change of materials. And we'll be talking about that today. What kind of materials do you think are appropriate for? Well, there could also be metal siding or other types of materials that are appropriate. And then also looking at upper story step backs, so that said that apartments can go up to 3 stories. maybe that third story is stepped back so that you get a variation there, particularly along interior property lines. Okay. So one of the things that we have before you today is a bunch of images, and they're there to just spark a conversation about what are the key elements of design that you'd like to see. We want to hear your reactions. One of the things that we think could be really neat to explore for this area, particularly around Supply Row, is tying into some of those materials, metal siding, the brick, the sort of warehouse aesthetic, but bringing it into a refined residential style, but also looking at a variety of buildings, particularly on the residential side. We really have a range from walk-up apartments to townhomes, as I described earlier, but we can also look at cottage court, mortar court, and even some mixed use. And we talked about this at workshop 2 as well. Some of you mentioned you'd like to see some of those different building types.
All right, Diego and Brooke, if you could go back real quick. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but it's been kind of rattling in my head that I wanted to check with our audience today, especially with this slide with the variation of multifamily housing here. It's kind of a pop quiz for everybody. Which one of these images would you say is affordable housing in Wasco? Ed's voting for this blue one. Okay. Anybody else? So that middle one that says walk-up apartments, this one here? That one there? That one there? Okay. Does it, since these were selected as affordable housing, does this look like regular market rate housing as well? Okay. Well, you'd be correct, and it's fairly new, and Diego did work on this project. It just opened up. It's north of 46, right next to some of the new housing tracks up there. So if you want to check it out and see what it looks like, this is actually specific to farm worker housing. And there's actually some other designs that are a little more row housing. They look condo style, but I believe they're all rental units. So just wanted to see if how everybody felt about this, but we'll get into the details. So Brooke and Hannah and Diego, go ahead and move us on to the group exercises.
Sounds good. So I'm going to walk us through the preferred land use plan here. I'd like to first do a quick summary of the existing, your current specific plan, which is also in the general plan. Just as a reminder, our downtown specific area goes up to Lucard, almost to Lucard Street to the north, down to Front in the south, over to Kern, Highway 33 along the east as it goes around there, and then 10th on the west. So this is the area of study for the specific plan. So currently there's a fairly generic mixed use, kind of moderate, allowing moderate residential mixed use designation kind of applied to almost the whole thing. And kind of the constraint to that was that it was really the development standards and the uses allowed were sort of constraining the ability to bring in a mix, to bring in variety, and to it just was inhibiting, not necessarily effectively attracting development. So that was the impetus for the specific plan update. So we are proposing a series of new land uses So I'm going to show you the preferred plan in just a moment, but wanted to give you an overview of what the uses are so that when I show you the picture, there's some context there. So we've included a little bit of medium density residential, which would allow for a mix of everywhere from some single family to some multifamily and different types of kind of lower density, middle density multifamily. There's a little bit of kind of what we call standalone commercial. And then the two key areas of focus are we've created a downtown core mixed use, which really looks at vertical mixed use. So putting residential over retail, entertainment, office uses. And then also what we call sort of a transition, which is used as a buffer mixed use that's looking more at horizontal mixed use, which is still allowing that mix of residential with office, entertainment, et cetera, but more at somewhat of a lower intensity on a horizontal scale versus necessarily going up. We also have included a small area with a live-work mixed use that's really intended to provide for both workforce housing as well as kind of attract that small artisan innovator kind of uses and businesses. We've expanded the office medical to try and further support and enhance and kind of attract an expansion of those uses. We've continued a small amount of light industrial and then certainly have some open space areas building off your rails to trails corridor. So this is what that map looks like. So we have focused, as you can see, that kind of darkest red. We focused that downtown core, that vertical mixed use designation along Center Street up to North and then down to Main. It's intended to emphasize really a fairly intense use of retail entertainment with higher density residential allowed. And then to support that core to the north, up to Kern and half a block beyond, and then down to Supply Row, we have that downtown transition use to provide, again, that more horizontal mix of uses, a little bit lower in intensity, but really still trying to have that mix of uses to enhance and kind of support the activation of that core area. To the east, southeast, you see a kind of a violet. I'll try and use my cursor to show you. Sorry. Cursor there. We have, if you can see my cursor here, we have kind of a violet purple color. That's our live work use. And that's really intended to sort of anchor the mix of uses happening in the downtown core. Then beyond that, we have the lighter purple, which is that medical office, building off some of those medical uses already there around the medical center. To the south, there's the darker color, which allows for kind of continuation and hopefully expansion of light industrial uses along there. And then down here along Supply Row is really where we intend to focus and hopefully attract really a high level of residential uses. This plan as a whole focuses on trying to balance new housing with jobs. Brings in kind of a wide range of uses, up to 4,272 jobs potentially. That's maximum build out. That would be if everything kind of as shown on this map, if development came in and really maximized what they could build and what they could achieve. And along with that, the maximum would be about 3,000 new residential uses, which is slightly more than the number of units identified in the general plan. So I'll just want to emphasize with this that this is really intended, even though you have a downtown specific plan with almost the same number of residential uses, this is really, we've revised the uses and this will inform new development standards that hopefully will be more effective at attracting new development. So I want to just touch on urban design. That's really where we're going to spend a lot of our discussion tonight. So what is it? What is urban design? It's those elements that make for the experience as you are in a place, from how the buildings look to the amenities and activities that are happening within what we call the public realm, which is kind of that space from the front of the building and along the street. So it's architecture and what those buildings look like. It's amenities such as monuments and signage that both help brand and create that sense of place, as well as signage and wayfinding to draw people into it. It's benches and fountains that invite people to use it. It's elements such as landscaping, trees, plazas, and other unique identifying elements such as public art that really increase the sense of place. So in this specific plan, we will be building from the uses identified in the preferred plan, and we'll be crafting and developing urban design standards. So what do those do? Those are really primarily intended to create a true, strong sense of place in downtown Taft. So we'll be looking and considering block sizes and the mix and interactions of land uses to enhance pedestrian experience and really activate the shared spaces. We'll be trying to foster a really unique atmosphere to shape the place, to preserve and enhance your Taft character. And it's really about understanding, urban design is about understanding the context of a place and a community, and to guide the development that happens within it, along the street, behind the street, and really promote human comfort and human interaction. So we are going to, at this point, jump into some breakout groups, and we're going to just spend a little bit of time, or I should say up to an hour, talking about these different elements that I just mentioned. So looking at the types and components of urban design that could be included in the downtown plan based on what you feel is most needed, what you feel would best express and enhance the unique Americana small town Taft character, what would best embrace its history and reflect and emphasize that history, and what would best facilitate and further development and just activate your downtown core. We're going to show a series of boards just like this one and walk through a series of them, each focused on kind of a different component or different element of urban design in order to kind of further visualize the different types and solicit your input and your feedback on what you'd most like to see. So I'm going to invite, we have two groups. The in-person, those of you that are there in the room with Mark, and then there's those of us that'll be doing it virtually here together. So we're going to kind of separate out that way, and we'll spend, like I said, almost up to an hour, about 45 minutes going through these boards. And we'll go through a series of kind of poll questions and just have a good discussion to talk about the opportunities for Taft. So we have a series of boards here. This is our first one. We're looking at parks, plazas, and open space. And I think Mark said those of you in the room have a worksheet in front of you. Okay, so you have a worksheet, and we just want to look at parks, plazas, and open space and what types of spaces you'd most like to see in downtown. So we have a poll question. You've got your worksheet. Those of us virtually are going to be able to take a poll here just on what types you'd like to see. And we've got kind of a list noted here. If you that are in the room can just mark it, we will be collecting those, but we won't be able to plug them into the online poll here. But want to give those online an opportunity to make some selections from a multiple choice poll, and then we'll take a look at that. So I'll give you just a moment to kind of absorb the images you see here. Think about what you think would be most relevant to Taft, and then take a moment to fill in that first question on the worksheet.
That are the examples here are somewhat on a bigger scale, the plazas, any of the green spaces and all that, but they definitely could be scaled based on the type of development or something that's squeezed into, like Sir Optimus Park on the 400 block of Center Street. So don't let the size of some of the example images, it just gives you that bigger, broader space that helps you identify with a plaza, a park. Stepped up amphitheaters we've probably seen in some other cities like this. You know, is that maybe how our stage evolves on this other side of the trail here?
So if anyone online wants to take the poll, feel free to just enter, pick your options, and then we'll kind of close it out.
There's no real specific, this is a specific plan, but we're not saying it has to go here, it has to go there. One thing that tends to happen with some park spaces is either some of the green space and paseos that Diego was mentioning earlier with development, they'll have some elements of that within the private property. It's kind of tough to see in the image. The example condo had a playground between itself and the trail, so I think I've had some conversations with some of you where that available green space can be a transition from the private development to the trail itself. Playgrounds, stationary exercise, fill in the blank, whatever it is, a sit-up bar or whatever it may be type of thing. There was something, if you've lived here many years and saw a plan, there was something indicating I think 2nd Street Park or so, like 12 years ago. So I don't know if that's maybe what you're imagining, is there was some thing down that way 12 years ago they were thinking about and we're feeling out back then. But so it looks like pretty split
This is
between.
what people online are saying. I'm curious to hear what people are saying there in the room. I'll navigate this as best I can, but I think, Mark, I'll need your help to be able to hear some of the input. As you were sort of getting to, I think the next question would be, as we're looking at this, is just what areas in downtown do you feel most need these outdoor areas? So I see plazas with outdoor seating, at least from those online, are desired. Promenades and plazas, shaded seating areas, natural play areas. So I don't know if that's corresponds or follows what those of you in the room want to see. Mark, do you want to help me sort of bring that?
So
input?
what are you guys talking about here, Deanna? This here? So the shaded seating here, from what I could tell from the image, it's a combination of things. So similar to our planners that we have at a couple of the intersections where the sidewalk comes out a little bit, it makes the crosswalk shorter. Some cities, they utilize that extra space to put some permanent bolted down benches along their downtowns and then add the trees for the shade. So if those are all elements you're looking for in different areas of not just Center Street, maybe as Main and Supply Road redevelop, they can incorporate those as well.
So those of you in the room on the worksheets, it would be really helpful.
I'm going to pass the mic to Deanna Jacobs, who's here in person, and I think she has some good comments about the plazas.
We were talking about the linear parks also. The areas that it's very natural looking. It would go in with some of our natural environment with the rocks and the bricks and some of the plants that go in there. But it also gets some seating areas if people are walking downtown or they want to go for walks, they can at least have somewhere to sit and relax too. We also like the shaded seating areas where we're utilizing some of the corners and different areas where there's some seating, there's some plants. It's a nice relaxing atmosphere.
Super.
Right. It brings back the Americana, or what, good old small town America, where everybody takes walks and they sit and visit with their neighbors and there's somewhere to enjoy it.
Does anybody have comments on some of the other items we have here? So we had the example of a playground area. I saw some heads nodding. Is that an element that either on the private property, because if you recall the just kind of example layouts that Diego showed, he just had a red square. That red square could be anything. The pool he mentioned, playground, maybe just a community room like this for the residents that live there, whatever it may be. Our playground, something we should have along the downtown area or more along the trail area. And then condos. Okay. And where people would walk from their condos out onto the trail, that playground would be right there. They're not having to go further down the street or whatever it may be. So some transitional recreation of some kind beyond just the grass we have there today is something that some of you would like. So as I've mentioned to you, Brooke, they're also mentioning the water feature, which actually is on another board. We're not there yet, but it is a recreation item or a plaza open space item, but that is part of another board. So that's still a good comment, and I've heard it from all of you over the years as well. So that's good to hear again.
Yeah. So maybe I'll move us on. We will get there unless there's any particular further input on parks and plazas. We'll get on to our next board, which is on residential multifamily development. And what types of multifamily, that's the element we've talked about the most because that was included in our PowerPoint. So here's the board that was in the presentation, taking a look at the different types of housing. We've, considered a couple of these already, but wanted to hear your input on what you'd like to see, whether it be mixed use, as in the top left-hand corner, that's kind of mixed use townhomes. Walk-up apartments, either small in scale or larger, more dense, and then just other townhomes, cottage courts or motor courts. What would you like to see? So for those online, we have the poll going. We'll give you a moment to kind of think through, look at the images, and encourage those of you in person to be marking up your worksheets. We're going to want to get those worksheets because it's really going to tell us, give us that in our hands feedback from you. So please feel free to mark them up.
On this other sheet, the storefront design, there's a brown building that has a historical type top to it. Historically, many of the downtown living areas were above the stores with the stores below. The stores below could have been living areas, and that would look very similar to what was here historically.
So the one example on the board here that shares that, although it doesn't have the elements that Guy was mentioning, is the upper left. This is a mixed use. There isn't much of a material or color change here, but you can see some of the storefronts that are on the ground floor with the residential on the upper floors there. So it's just a different design. That's more correct. But definitely the one you pointed out, which we'll get to the storefront design because there's some design elements we'll discuss. But it echoes a lot of what we have on Center Street for sure.
I'd encourage those online to fill out the poll if you're interested. I'm going to close it out here.
Mark, I didn't quite understand the comment. Was the question or comment related to a change of materials, particularly for that mixed use example, that the ground level might want to be brick?
No, he's okay with it. It's just he spotted a board we're going to be going over with the storefront designs. And it had the one that has the arcade and is a little tan colored, shares some of the details that we already have here in downtown. So you spotted something a couple boards ahead of where we'll be. But then I just pointed out the example we do have on the current board we're looking at.
Great. Yeah, I mean, it is a good way to distinguish the commercial from the residential with the change of materials.
Yeah.
Does anybody else want to share their comments on this board or something you don't even see on the boards as an example, or places you've been before, that had a design detail you liked there, or how their mix of commercial and residential worked?
And whether it be from a design standpoint, what type would best fit, or just understanding the needs of the community, what types are most needed, be really helpful for us to understand.
And based on the poll that's up on the screen here, is there one that is somewhat preferred in your opinion? The walk-up apartments are most likely the rentals, and the mixed-use townhomes and the townhomes on the bottom are the for-sale units. Is there any opinion one way or the other on it, the mix of the two? What one more over the other, but still mixing both options so people have the opportunity to purchase or rent.
Really what we're asking is which ones would feel right or feel like a fit in your community.
The mixed use, I've always liked that. Living above your business is really coming back in the larger communities. And then if we have to go with the apartment look, I like the small scale detached buildings because each building can have its own character. That look like the one that I can see on the upper right-hand corner. Is that metal? Okay. I like how it has two different types of color, and each one has its own character. And I think anytime we have big apartments, like down there across the street from the old Safeway parking lot with the T111 siding, which was good back in the 80s, pretty soon they just look outdated. And I think it's easier to take care of and change colors and everything if they're smaller, and like I said, it has more character.
There's actually two different kinds of the mixed use. Townhomes type or apartments over retail where they're not connected. And then there's the shopkeeper unit. Now, I don't know how popular that is and how easy that is to do. I know that, it's been 30 years ago. They did them in Little Italy, I think, is where they were doing them. And I don't know if those are even possible or if they're even a viable product.
Units themselves aren't shown here, but that certainly is a type that we could include, and really a type that would be excellent to go in that live work area as well, that we've identified just to the east, along the east end, anchoring the east end. And in here you can see there's obviously a real difference in sort of the bulk and the scale. Looking at our preferred plan, the intent would be to have some of that higher bulk potentially along the core and just flanking the core, and then perhaps, the lower scale, the smaller scale walk-ups surrounding it, or cottage courts, etc. I think I'm going to move us on unless there's some
I got one other quick comment.
Okay,
the issue
go for it.
The issue of scale in Taft, almost invariably, the larger scale apartments are the ones that look the worst in the town within about 10 to 20 years. That's always an issue here. So not that it can't be dealt with, but if the design needs to be something that has a certain level of ability to be preserved longer. Otherwise, in my opinion at least, the smaller units seem to be able to survive better.
And I think Diego touched on that briefly when he was showing the 3D example of both the townhomes and the apartments, trying to not have just a big box type of thing, and some of that upper floor setbacks are certainly some things that could be incorporated into the specific plan with design guidelines. There's a term in the planning and design world of form-based codes. We're not necessarily going that direction, but the design guidelines can have some elements of that over 2 stories, you got to start stepping things back or providing more variation to the design, just like Ed was mentioning, that you got color changes, you got material changes, and things like that help with the overall design of it. And hopefully it does have that future proofing that doesn't wear down and age over time, and all of a sudden it's an eyesore for the area. So
I'm going to move us on if that's okay.
Yes.
Near and dear to Guy's heart is adaptive reuse and historic preservation. So here, just a few examples of different ways of achieving that or using that, doing that, whether it be warehouse to office, residential to some sort of entertainment, industrial to residential. there's such a range of opportunities. And I think this harkens back to what Guy was saying used to exist, and there's elements still in your town of this. So what elements of these or what types of these do you think you'd like to see in Taft?
It's really a matter of creativity, I would say. The image on the top right residential lofts. And then the image on the bottom left is a warehouse. So there's really a lot of opportunity, I think, to repurpose buildings.
Absolutely. I'll give you guys a moment to think through.
So for those of us here in the transit center, your bottom left is essentially your Varco building. That's right here, just down the street. The inside is almost identical to that, similar type of warehouse construction from 20 plus years ago. It's almost hollowed out like that. There's a little bit of office space in the front, but in this case, I'm not sure if that's furnishings or interior design type elements with the business that's using that space. There is with the altered decor, if that's one and the same, I'm not sure. And then as they mentioned, you have the old warehouse with new built on and around it. So there's that, and then just working with what you have on these brick warehouses, some period architecture, and then again, some new above old on the upper left, and then the upper right is your mission style, Spanish style. That's pretty predominant throughout California.
So would love to hear thoughts if anyone wants to share what types they think would best fit downtown. The other part of that question is, what are the opportunities specifically for historic preservation? I know Guy shared with us a bit at the last workshop, but would love to hear from you all.
The upper left picture and the lower right, I don't think would match with Taft. It just wouldn't work with just our overall theme. It doesn't go with the rest of the buildings that we have. It looks too much like Los Angeles. I do like the idea of the multi-use, like the warehouse, and putting offices in there, or like an office in some of it and the cafe in there. That would be nice to see some of these buildings being used for more than just one thing.
Also, restoring some of our old buildings, like right there in the middle, right? We have a lot of beautiful old buildings here. I think restoring that and keeping it somewhat modern uses, that would be nice. Keep our history.
So with the Wilson's, right? Hardware. And pretty much all three of the four corners, the southwest corner, the all white painted building right now, reuse of those buildings, retail below. I know the Wilson's Hardware above has had iterations of motel, apartments, whatnot. I got up there a couple years ago. A lot of it's stripped right now, so it needs to be rebuilt. But everybody here would be okay with that being repurposed in that way. Go ahead and get residential in the upper floors there. It's kind of in between these two, but it's definitely our Taft version of it, where it's more this one where the entire brick warehouse or brick style, the Americana style that we've mentioned a number of times, stays intact, but you're reusing the interior. A lot of these examples are definitely from a lot of the urban areas that were probably some form of like textile mills or other early versions of industrial uses producing XYZ goods out of them, and now they're turning into everyday retail, restaurant, office spaces.
Yeah, the scale or potentially the uses, the transition might be different in Taft, but this is really intended just to spark the discussion and the thought process on just what the opportunities might be, what you think would be relevant.
The residential to restaurant use picture with the upper story and the two levels and pillars, that would be perfect for even taking something we have now that that has had those elements removed from it at some point, because I know some of the ones did. They had things like that and they were removed. Having those put back on and making it look very similar to that would be historically perfect.
Well, it all depends on what type of restaurants is going to be below me if I'm living above it. Because where I come from, there was a pho restaurant below, and their exhaust vent was going right up where the people were living. So, like I said, it all depends on what type of restaurant, if you like it or not. That's going to be below
the
you.
construction design for sure matters.
In this example, I believe the second story is offices of the restaurant. Certainly help.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think I'll move us on to Streetscape, if that's okay.
Yes.
Streetscape is really looking at those elements within what we call the right-of-way, really those areas along the street, within the street. So whether that be landmark and focal points, such as this clock, crosswalks, and just the pedestrian sidewalk opportunities, sidewalk or crosswalks, what kind of street furniture, benches, outdoor dining. What of these elements would you like to see? What's missing and what's most needed? Love to hear.
You already have a lot of these great elements on Center Street. It definitely shows. So how do we build off of those and add?
So one thing I noticed is that the street furniture and shade kind of center, lower center right, is a different angle on some of the street seating that Deanna mentioned earlier that she liked. I think the image before was a little more from afar, kind of looking at the overall intersection or corner there. So is there anything else or other images that you like?
They used to have the outdoor and street dining. The outdoor street dining used to be the nicest place to eat.
The landmarks, like with the clock and maybe with some oil derricks, things that'll bring out what Taft is, put along those areas. I like that.
The picture that I just handed Mark is a picture of Center Street back in the 1920s, and it has a large square box on a post similar to what the clock would look like on the landmarks. Yeah. And that was there for at least 20 years, and it had advertisements for some of the local businesses that were there. So something like that has been here in the past.
Excellent. I think you've given us that image before, and we still have everything you gave us.
Since we're talking about outdoors, I'd like to see more of a bicycle-friendly atmosphere downtown where there's plenty of places to park bikes. The electric bike community here, we have about 25 to 30 strong here. And when you spend that much for a bike, you just don't want to set it outside and go into a restaurant and go eat. So if we had bicycle parking where we can lock our bikes up and everything, even bike paths. I know we have one little one, I think, on East Kern. So I feel safe in that 100 yards of bicycling. But but if there's places to park and secure a bike, it might bring us down more to downtown area.
Yeah, and those elements can be both, like you said, attracting you to come to downtown on your bike, as well as there's a lot of opportunity to use those bike racks themselves to sort of brand your downtown and just kind of bring out your character. So.
And I know one thing we've all talked about, especially those of us here in Taft, we mentioned it briefly earlier, where pretty much between 4th and 6th you have the oil-filled artwork and the bulb outs. These are more referencing enhanced crosswalks, which is more of either the paving or a painted design or whatnot. But all of these also have somewhat of a bulbing out, so it makes this crosswalk a lot shorter for everybody to get across, which makes it a lot safer and all that. So I think a lot of folks here would like to see more of that planner oil-filled art, or at least the shorter crosswalks all the way down probably to the DMV on the one end, and probably all the way to Snow White if we could on the other end, at least for Center Street.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think we have somewhat of a consensus on that with the enhanced crosswalks, Brooke.
Okay. Super. Anything else?
And one side comment was that the oil-filled art, so the art portion, I know we do have somewhat of an art oriented board on here, but that's an early comment for thumbs up on the art.
Okay. Got it. Super. Okay, I'm going to move us on then to our next board, which is looking at Paseos, Greenways, alleys, arcades. So this is really some of those kind of pedestrian areas really primarily help to bring connection either within downtown between uses, but really also to make connections between the surroundings. So the surrounding residential. So helping provide and attract and kind of draw that pedestrian or bike into the downtown through different kinds of spaces, and provide kind of both that safety, the aesthetic and attractive and just pleasant experiences, which are going to create those connections that draw people in. So a few opportunities, few options, different types. One thing to consider in these is, as you're thinking about what's most relevant to Taft, sometimes those elements that provide not just, all of these are options to provide safety from vehicles as a pedestrian, but what elements, consider the weather, what elements consider safety from lighting and eyes on the street, etc. Just a few considerations. So which ones would be most beneficial? Particularly both existing and thinking through how Taft's downtown is right now, but especially as we consider what kind of new development could come in based on the preferred plan. What types of these connections do you think would be most beneficial? And really helping us understand where would be really helpful as well.
So, Brooke, we did have a question that I'll just repeat. The lower left alley example, it was more specific to the structure that is covering it. We probably don't have an existing place for that, but some of the gaps that might be filled in along Center Street, or even somebody who wants to create something new that has something like that, and maybe it's a little bit wider because that's where the outdoor seating will be instead of out on the street. So that's where it might come in. It's not too specific to the cover. Just think of that as a weather protection area, whether it's sun, rain, and the like, with the alley example on that graphic.
You have some of these things already. Obviously, there's the connection on from Fifth on Fifth Street from Center to.
Go ahead, Deanna.
You do have a mid-block connection there, very similar to the ones that we're showing here.
We're no longer having trash picked up in the alleys anymore. So in this reconstruction of everything, are we going to make those alleys useful for some of the businesses that have restaurants to have outdoor seating back there?
Yeah, absolutely.
And if that's the case, then some of these definitely would work with a way to walk into those and out of those.
Yeah.
I like the walkway in the bottom right and the one next to it. Those are the little walkways and some plants to go through there. Would make it nice if you're walking up to a restaurant through the back that way.
Absolutely.
I love that.
So don't think of us as being pro speakeasy, but maybe we are. But I think there might have been some early examples. I think when you, in workshop one, where you talked about it a little bit in the planning world, the activate the alley, title gets thrown out there. And that's definitely something the folks here in Taft have mentioned to me over the years, particularly because since you guys have visited here, you've noticed some of the blank walls, typically on the sides and even the rear, where not only is there is a lot of charm with a lot of our buildings here, but it's also the area that's available for art, which the upper left arcade looks like it's at its share of a corner of a mural is a little bit exposed there. So the folks here are definitely looking for some art in areas, even on the backside on the alleys. And there's been, I think a couple years ago, there was some energy for an art in the alley type of thing, and other things where you could kind of block it off, and that's the Paseo or Plaza area for some events, if those rear doors to the businesses can sustain that, or it just ends up being that nice flat area away from the street for events and other activities. You got another comment.
Okay.
If we can have murals, we can learn a lot from the Tehachapi community. They have a mural mapped out where you walk around the town with different murals, from the 52 earthquake mural to veterans murals. Even in Bakersfield, they have different murals, but if you set it up where it's a walking tour, you know, whatever brings people downtown from out of town, and I figure the new Every Penny Counts has a great wall facing west. She can donate to us. No, but yeah, murals can explain what our community is all about in its own little way, and where we've started and where we're at now. But I think we can learn a lot from Tehachapi.
Absolutely. I mean, that's two birds with one stone, right? That's bringing beauty through the art, as well as emphasizing and really bringing out, hearkening back to your history and making that helping that come alive. Absolutely. We will look at the Tehachapi example.
Mark wanted me to share an idea that I had. The buildings that were historically here from the beginnings of the town to the 1930s approximately are completely gone. Most of them were very unique buildings with unique names and things like that. And something that could add to the murals as a draw to bring someone downtown is maybe plaques placed at the locations of the buildings with maybe numbers on them or something to then be able to go to a website to get a complete history that is known of that building. And that way somebody can walk up to the plaque, they can see the name of the building that was originally there, and then continue on walking while they're looking up the historic information on what the building was.
And that's somewhat of a segue into the next element, the next board, which is Storefront Design. I'll give you, Guy, a particular opportunity to jump in. I know you were bringing this up earlier, but just wanted to show some different options for Storefront, and particularly want to spend some time looking at the different design elements that are most important to both activation and activating the Center Street probably and others, but also which are most consistent with the historical character that the Guy you've already mentioned. So we put a little box here to try and help call out the different elements that are occurring or shown in these examples, whether that's what we call transparency, which is the window space. There's also differentiation. You know, some of those entrances are recessed. The different kinds of signage, awnings and projections, and then just different materials, which all, you know, bring out and help kind of tailor your character.
The photo on the lower middle, we already have several buildings that look very, very similar to that. And that's ours? Okay.
Yes, it's yours.
And that style and the style of the upper would work for both the businesses, the multi-use with business and residential, and even even a residential building with that type of facade on it. I think that would be very, very nice.
Okay, so I know I wasn't on the microphone when I was asking the group, but although I think most people like the building in the upper right and even the upper left, one thing they don't like is covering up existing buildings that already have the exposed brick, masonry, whatever it may be, with stucco. So I think something in the design guidelines would be not allowing the covering up. But new construction, if it comes in with stucco, Spanish, whatever style it is, we're okay with that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have several photos of the, I believe it's 400 block of Center Street, where you have 3 houses in a row, where one is stucco, the next one's brick, and the next one is wood. So any combination of building materials like that would be consistent with what was historically downtown Center Street.
And I think we all would appreciate the variety, not a monotony of,
Right.
even if it is all masonry, somehow it needs to maybe change up a little bit from building to building.
Yeah. Differentiation is very important.
Yep.
Absolutely. Whether that's materials or, depth of the facade, height. Yes. Okay, that's going to segue.
One more comment.
Oh, go for it.
Sorry, a lot of the older buildings, at least along Center Street, if you look, they at one time had awnings with the old mechanical crank that would bring the awning out during the day and then they could crank it back up in the evening. I still think that those are something that might be worth looking at as well.
So as an option to the permanent style. Yeah.
Mark, do you mind repeating that just so we can make sure we heard it clearly?
Jerry, our vice chair of the Planning Commission, mentioned that he liked some of the buildings that had the old crank style of the awning coming out, so it could be brought out for shade during the day and rolled back up at night.
Okay.
As an awning option. They still like the permanent ones, but that he likes the old crank style ones too.
Okay. So moving us on from sort of the design of the building itself, we're going to talk a little bit about uses, and we can also use urban design to allow for different kinds of activity and uses. So here are some examples of whether it be a farmer's market or what we call pop-up retail, or entertainment or restaurants. These are all ways that would just give people a reason to come into downtown and stay a while. So which of these feel relevant? Which of these would you like to see? Yeah.
I'm very pro container park. If you guys knew Tony Hsieh from Las Vegas, he put in a great container park. And what it does, it allows a person that thinks they have a business that they want to try out, and all they have to have is like a 3-month or 6-month contract where they can't afford to go into a brick and mortar. If it fails, it fails. If it succeeds, then they say, okay, I'm going to need a bigger building, so they'll maybe move on to Center Street or find another building in Taft somewhere. In that container park, they also have a stage for entertainment. They also have restaurants. They also have little outside bars set up. And also I'm pro the pop-up containers, like for maybe down there at the 5th Street Plaza or over there at the, I don't even know what you call it, the stage right over here. So whenever there is a event going on, it's already set up, and whoever's putting on the event can use them.
Absolutely.
And we do have a lot of available open lot areas, anywhere from our public parking lots up and down Center Street. A couple are off north. There's even the paved lot where the Lions Club parks their trailer on Friday nights next to the Oddfellows door. That's an area where one of these containers could go. They've been ideal for startups, particularly because it is a small square footage. And with some business owners here, there's a lot of square footage in some of our stores that are here. what do you do with all that space kind of thing. So I don't know, it wasn't really part of our presentation, Brooke or Diego. I don't know if either one of you maybe could comment on our downtown buildings. The ground floors tend to have more than 1,500 or 2,000 square feet of commercial space. And one trend has been to either complementarily or even differing uses. It's not quite an indoor swap meet, but I don't know if either of you could mention something on that until we get our next comment.
Sure. Diego, do you want to jump in? I mean, I'm happy to as well.
Yeah, no, we've seen some of that happen in other cities where you take divide it up. It's a barber shop, flower shop, coffee shop. And it's great for small scale mom and pop startup businesses. And they'll share a lot of the infrastructure that requires, permits and health department and stuff like that, those kinds of approvals, access and the expense.
Yeah. And we can craft the development standards and such to really not just allow that, but encourage and make that as easy and smooth as possible.
As far as the games list on there, I just was thinking that I was always fond, anybody who's been over to Morro Bay, there's a little park, and I'm talking about really little, and it had a giant chess set in it. And I don't know if it's still there or not. I haven't been there in a while, but that was always a very fun experience for me as a younger kid to go over and pick up the pieces and actually move them, because the pieces were about half my size when I first started trying to play it.
So do you want to talk about, tactical urbanism with that comment? Because some of the, especially with the pandemic, with a lot of cities allowing more of sidewalk, and even like what we have, a lot of cities took up some of that angled parking to expand the seating areas even more. That's what actually some of the examples on the prior boards, if you couldn't tell, there were some platforms that made the sidewalk essentially extend out into the street a little bit. So, and that's kind of in the same realm of what Jerry just mentioned with the oversized chess set, or even if it's big discs to play checkers.
Absolutely. And what we've really seen is in a lot of places, those, when they first started intended temporary uses, there's just been so much activation. They've been such a success, and the community wants them to stay, that there's been changes in code to allow them to become permanent.
And what Brooke's hinting at for everybody here, the cities have taken pretty much the cheapest paint they can to kind of cordon off areas of a street to mark it off, because they could easily wash it, a week or a month later, just so it's not permanent. But to get all of you to flood our phones and emails with, I like it, I don't like it, we need more of it, whatever it may be. And cities have been taking more of that chance and using cones, using paint, platforms, whatever it is to get a response out of the folks. We don't always have to meet in a room like this. If we could put something out there to get a response and see if it works for downtown. That's what Brooke was hinting at about some of these temporary installations.
Yeah.
Yep. That's exactly.
So we have a few more elements we want to make sure. I think we're starting to run out of time, so I want to make sure we still have. There's a few that I know are important for us to talk about. So wanted to put up the signage and gateways markers, give you an opportunity to share your ideas on this element and which types would be most needed, would be most relevant. Signage is particularly an effective way to help, and the gateways, what the monuments look like, really are an important component of creating that sense to people coming in that there is a place to come to and to draw people in, as well as to brand it and really give it a particular identity. And a lot of times, even that feeling of a unique identity and there being a unique sense of place to it really attracts people to come into it.
So I'm going to introduce you to Sherry Black, who's trying to get a archway built here a couple of years ago. I'm sure we'll start up sometime soon.
Okay, maybe 3-4 years ago, we had a committee started to do an arch like the one for Sparks. at the corner of 6th and Kern, 6th and Center, sorry. Then the oil prices oil kind of went down to the dumps. And then there was COVID, and now it's like, oh gosh. But the idea of putting an arch and making it look like oil derricks on the end, and just it would face, the anchors would be east and west. So as you're coming down Kern Street, you could see it. If you're coming up 6th, either way on 6th. Such a great idea, and we've got, we just need a lot of money and backing. But that would tie in kind of, the center of town, and we'll get it done maybe by the time. Let's see, what was it we heard at Kiwanis today? Carbon recovery. So maybe that'll be somebody we can get money from.
Well, we will put a monument plan in the specific plan to hopefully encourage it to better happen or happen sooner.
Well, we did get pretty far along on a signage plan similar to that orange wayfinding, but then we all kind of ran up against the wall of COVID, and we also were, every 5 years we have our Oil Dorado event. We were trying to avoid stepping on any toes for the fundraising that's done for that as well. So hopefully with coming out of the pandemic and some of these elements incorporated into the plan, it'll restart those efforts.
I think unless you have any comments, I'll move us on to shade and lighting.
So one quick thing, go to shade and lighting, but an extra comment. It's not shown so much on the signage, gateways, and markers, because that's typically something that's installed by a city, but the actual business signs, we had a extra comment about having some good guidelines that are strict on the signage, appropriate for the architecture, I'm assuming, and so that's the comment.
Absolutely. The business signage can really help enhance or detract from the character along the street. Absolutely. Okay, moving on to shade and lighting. Here, just some particularly creative options, but hopefully they really help illustrate the opportunities to use shade and lighting to create interest, to draw people in. Shapes and elements can really help define the space in a way that says Taft or otherwise. So here's some thoughts for your feedback. I think we recognize that weather, and particularly heat in Taft, is an important reality, and to try and create elements or implement elements through the downtown that are going to draw people in year round. Shade is likely a particularly important element to include and consider. So we try to give you a number of options for that here too.
I have given Mark some copies of some photographs from the teens and 20s of what types of lighting was either on the buildings or on the streets of Taft. And many of them they're varied, they're all different. Some appear to be store installed lighting, some of it appears to be city lighting. And as an example, the lighting that is on the front of the Dollar General, that's one of the newest buildings that have been put in, are very appropriate to what was there historically.
Excellent.
And to be specific on that, it's getting some of the, gooseneck, last part of the light fixture, part of the assembly, if you will, part of it. And you'll see it when I get you the photos that Guy provided. The front side of the Dollar General, we got some short gooseneck extended out lighting along the wall there, which is definitely appropriate here. I think one thing that would stand out, as much as there's kind of an artistic flair to some of those fabric shade covers, our heat here does do a pretty good job of deteriorating and destroying things. So there's been a number of projects here, including our transit center here. We at one point considered fabric instead of the continuation of the roof line. And we figured the extra cost for something rigid long-term, durable, would last and be worth the money. And you do have a couple of rigid options with the white structure to the upper part and the upper right. So it's definitely something here where, whether it's something along Rails to Trails or something integrated into a project, more of a all-weather cover, non-fabric would definitely be welcomed or encouraged.
Okay.
And that glow-in-the-dark bike trail is kind of cool too.
Excellent. Anything else?
We got one more comment.
Excellent.
I hate mention this town a lot, but Vegas just redid their old downtown, their main street. That's not even close to Fremont or anything. And what they did is they went with the commercial string patio lights, I guess you would call them. And so they went about, I would say, about a 3/8 of a mile. And they can change the colors on whatever holiday is coming up. And really, it's an inviting atmosphere. And since what's weird about our center street is 600 block, the lighting poles are staggered, which would be perfect to do it. But when you go down on the 500 block on down, now they're lined up, which is good during Christmas. But so what Vegas did is they put in their own designer poles and put them in. And so that's all LED and everything else. So the electrical part of it wouldn't even be that expensive.
Excellent.
I think I've seen that in some other communities as well, where they want to string up either the banners, lighting, whatever it may be. But some of the poles have no lighting or other benefit other than being an anchor spot for what gets draped across the street.
Yeah.
When I was back east last summer, the one with the lights, the pole there with the light, there's over in the middle, the pedestrian scale lighting. They were using lighting like that, but they were also combining signage on it, and they would change it for holidays. They would have, or in the summer times, they'd have baskets with flowers. But different events during the year, they use it for signage for Christmas or whatever they've got going on. And then, so it's a combination of lighting and signage and advertising. And it was very attractive. I just thought it was beautiful.
So yeah, the banners that you see on, and I just hit it for myself, on the signage, gateways and markers, the streetscape signage, the signs that are anchored on the lighting fixture or light standard that's there. That's what Deanna was referring to, and I'm sure you guys have seen that as well in some other areas where, I don't know if those posts are convertible where it could go from signs one day to holding baskets of flowers or something when they're seasonal and all that. So I think that's the overall comment there.
Thank you. Great idea. Okay. Last but not least is what's already been mentioned. What you guys have been waiting for is public art and water features. Have the comment from before in terms of the mural and how the murals can, we could essentially storyboard the history of Taft through a mural, incorporating plaques for historic buildings. So we've got that comment. But here are some other options. I'd love to build on what we've already heard to just hear whatever else you might want to share in terms of what you think you'd like to see in Taft, and also particular buildings that particularly need a mural to soften it, or building sites that are in a particularly active space that we could use to really provide that enhanced element.
This is Jerry. Actually, I'm pretty fond of just about any kind of art. You go to almost any city, if you're in San Diego, which I did a long time, you see all those wonderful, weird animals that are in the Balboa Park. I can't remember the lady's name at the moment. Nikki de St. Paul, I guess, if I remember correctly. Or you go to Rapid City, South Dakota, and you've got presidents on just about every street corner in downtown in bronze, or Art Alley, where the art changes depending on who's doing the artwork that week. So in my mind, what we really need is to find ways to encourage as many different kinds of artwork to be done. And I agree, any place where there's a nice blank slate in the downtown area, if the building owner is willing to either share it or is willing to consider allowing it to be used as an art palette, I think it should be encouraged.
Also, I got a side comment of incorporating some sort of contest for certain walls that could be painted on, and we definitely would work with the property owners because it is their building. So that's always a key aspect with all these murals. But I think the comment from Jerry is sure we want oil related, but we also welcome unrelated because the art on the grocery outlet building, that's, I don't know if there's necessarily an element in there that's Taft related. Maybe they snuck it in, with an Easter egg or something in there. But most people have liked what they've done with that wall there and wouldn't mind seeing it elsewhere, I believe.
Excellent. Excellent. Anything else?
We mentioned it earlier, but since it's up now, the water park that is shown there is definitely something folks have been commenting over the years with me, and we did just get that as a side comment here. More of that, low-level bubbler style that you see in that picture.
Okay. Yep. The water features like that really tend to bring out the families, and they not only come out, but then they stay a while.
Yes, and definitely our trail here draws folks out every night. They're walking either on their own or with a group of people, so having a feature along this area definitely would fit.
Yeah. Excellent.
The thing is, these elements could be combined in synergistic way.
Yeah, not just standalone.
Yeah.
Really good lighting combined with the water feature with some artistic element along one of those paseos or plazas.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. With outdoor seating and restaurants nearby.
Yes.
Well, you all helped a lot to help us kind of create this vision, add some detail to the different things that we could incorporate into the plan to really try and emphasize and bring out the vision and incorporate the things that you think will help really create a good downtown for your community. I'm going to ask, I think I just wanted to take just a moment as we wrap up to ask if there was any other kind of outstanding questions. I want to give just a couple moments for that, and then also let you know that the worksheet that you had in hand and then the questions that we kind of asked as we were talking through, we're going to create an online survey that'll be posted to the website by tomorrow. So if you have either additional input you want to provide, or there are others that you think would want to provide input, it would be great for you to pass that along. And we'll give you, I think we have until kind of the next couple of weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, to provide us that additional input. And we would love to get that.
And I will definitely be posting that on the both the city website and Facebook page to capture every possible eye I can digitally online.
Yeah. So with that, we are going to adjourn, I think, unless there's some other key questions.
The one last comment, Brooke, was if we could make sure that all 10 of these urban design element boards are posted on the project website for reference.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure about the survey structure, whether the image will be right there, but hopefully the survey will pop up in a different window and you can kind of go back and forth to click the options you prefer and fill in the blank.
We'll structure it accordingly. Absolutely. So from here, we will, like I mentioned during kind of the presentation portion, we'll be taking your feedback here and really starting to draft the specific plan. And then we'll look to bring that back to you through public review of that document sometime this summer. So thank you to everyone for your input and your ideas and your conversation. I really appreciate it.
And just to echo the last part, Brooke, not to get too detailed about beyond this point, but we'll have the results of the survey, but there's going to be a bit of a lag till we get to what will essentially be the Planning Commission meeting, which is probably midsummer. Part of that was on the schedule early on in the PowerPoint. That part of it is the long period that the project team will take for the environmental part. So the numbers you saw with jobs, the housing units, all that, those maximum numbers get put into the environmental document, churns out what the traffic impacts and other things are. And then we have to prepare the document. We go through the state review and public process. So there's some days and months in that review before we get to Planning Commission in the summer. So that's why we're here end of March, but the formal get together again is probably sometime in July and beyond. But as I've been doing those service clubs, I'll definitely come out and share if there's any minor updates I can share. And with anybody who wants it in a group setting, I'll definitely do that. And I'll definitely be trying to do that at our Planning Commission meetings as well, just to keep people updated as we go through the process and not wait all 4 months or whatever it's going to end up being by the time we get to the public hearing. So, all right, well, thank you, Brooke, Diego,
Thank you.
Anna.
Thanks to everyone. We will
Thank you.
sign us off on our end.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.